The old house stood on a windswept hill, overlooking the town of Silent Hollow. Locals whispered about it, their voices hushed and laced with fear. They said the house was haunted, that a dark entity dwelled within its decaying walls. Sarah had always been drawn to the macabre, the thrill of the unknown. When she inherited the house from a distant relative, she saw it not as a haunted relic, but as an opportunity, a chance to explore the darkness, to confront her deepest fears. Ignoring the warnings of the townsfolk, Sarah moved into the house. The first few days were uneventful. The silence was deafening, the shadows long and ominous, but nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, as the days turned into nights, an unsettling feeling began to creep over her. It started with whispers, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to slither through the walls. Sarah dismissed them as the wind, the old house settling, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct, until she could almost make out words. Words that spoke of pain, of suffering, of death. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps that echoed through the empty corridors. Sarah would lie in bed, her heart pounding in her chest, listening to the footsteps approach her door, only to stop just outside. One night, the whispers and footsteps culminated in a vision. As Sarah lay in bed, she saw a figure standing in the corner of her room. It was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadows. Its eyes, however, burned with an unholy light. The figure raised a skeletal hand towards her, and Sarah felt an icy grip tighten around her throat. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. She was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake. The next morning, Sarah was shaken but alive. She tried to convince herself it was just a dream, a product of her overactive imagination. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. The house was alive, and it wanted her. Ignoring her fear, Sarah decided to delve into the house's history. She spent hours in the dusty library, poring over old documents and journals. She learned of the house's previous owner, a reclusive man named Silas Blackwood. Silas was rumored to have practiced dark magic, to have made a pact with an evil entity. The journals spoke of rituals, of sacrifices, of a desperate attempt to achieve immortality. They described a horrifying entity, a being of pure darkness and malice that Silas had summoned. But the ritual had gone wrong, and the entity had turned on him, consuming his soul and trapping him within the house's walls. Sarah realized the truth. The figure she had seen, the whispers she had heard, the footsteps in the hall. It was Silas, or rather, what was left of him. He was trapped, and he was angry. And now, Sarah was his new target. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah knew she had to act. She couldn't leave the house. The entity wouldn't let her. She had to confront it, to banish it back to the darkness from whence it came. Following the instructions in Silas's journals, Sarah prepared for a ritual of her own. She gathered the necessary ingredients, rare herbs, ancient symbols, and a powerful incantation. As she prepared, the house seemed to grow darker, the whispers louder, the footsteps more insistent. On the night of the ritual, Sarah stood in the center of the house's main hall, the air thick with anticipation and dread. She lit the candles, the flames flickering and casting eerie shadows on the walls. She began to chant the incantation, her voice trembling but firm. As she chanted, the house seemed to convulse. The walls shook, the windows rattled, and the temperature plummeted. The entity manifested before her, a towering figure of darkness, its eyes burning with malevolent energy. Sarah continued the ritual, her voice growing stronger, more confident. The entity roared, its power growing, but Sarah held her ground. She would not be deterred. She would not let the darkness consume her. Finally, as Sarah reached the climax of the incantation, a blinding light filled the hall. The entity shrieked, its form dissolving into smoke and shadows. The house fell silent, the darkness receding, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Sarah had won. She had banished the entity, freed Silas's soul, and reclaimed the house as her own. But she knew that the darkness was always lurking, waiting for an opportunity to return. And she would be ready.